Hi everyone, this is Cecil, and in today's Yellowstone podcast, I'm going to be giving you an overall perspective of what you might like to plan for and what you may like to know before you actually come out here to Yellowstone National Park. I received a Facebook message where a guy said that the podcasts that I do are great, they've got a lot of detail, but why don't you do one that gives an overall perspective? And what he was referring to was that so many of the podcasts and virtual Yellowstone tours, like the one that you may be looking at on YouTube, if you are listening or watching this on YouTube, this is one from Grand Geyser to Old Faithful, and I go into so much detail that he suggested it might be an idea to do one that gives more of an overall view, an overall perspective. So this is what I'm going to be doing. You may find it helpful to watch this on YouTube because I'm going to be using several maps, but if you choose not to do it on YouTube, not to listen to it or watch it on YouTube, and if you're on Spotify or Google Podcasts or whatever, you may find it useful to bring up a couple of maps. One of them you can see at our motel website, ysmotel.com/map. That's YS, short for Yellowstone, ysmotel.com/map. And the other one is just Google Maps. So this is what I'm going to be talking about on this Yellowstone Know Before You Go podcast. And I anticipate that because there's so much information, this is going to be a multi-part series. So today I'm going to be talking about which entrance should you use, which airport should you fly into, and where should you stay? Because those are some of the questions that we get asked the most, and also some of the questions that I see coming up the most on various of the Facebook groups. The first map that I'm going to be looking at, if you're on our site ysmotel.com/map, is a map of Yellowstone. And many of you will know this by now. The roads through Yellowstone make up a massive figure of 8. And there are 5 entrances to Yellowstone National Park. And I'm going to be talking about those in the first part of this podcast. Interestingly enough, although about 97% of the park is in the state of Wyoming, 3 of the entrances are in Montana, 2 are in Wyoming. There is actually access to another one where you come through Idaho, but there's nowhere to stay there, so I'm not going to worry about that one for the purpose of this podcast. So if we're looking at the map at ysmotel.com/map, you can see me zooming in to the west entrance. The west entrance is Yellowstone's busiest entrance, far and away. And the reason for this is, if you look at Google Maps, and I'm going to zoom out a bit, I'm circling where West Yellowstone is, but basically if you are coming from anywhere in the western United States, with the exception of the Seattle area and to the north of Seattle, Google Maps or your GPS system will route you through Yellowstone's west entrance. And this is why, as I say, it does tend to be the busiest entrance to Yellowstone. Let's consider now what you can access from West Yellowstone. West Yellowstone is really nicely positioned to see just about all of Yellowstone's lower loop, particularly the thermal areas. When I say thermal areas, I'm talking about thermal features. There's 4 main thermal features which I do talk about in various of our other Yellowstone podcasts and virtual Yellowstone tours. But if you're looking at the ysmotel.com/map, you can see that West Yellowstone is really close to the area where most of the main geyser basins are. So from that perspective, it's a great place to stay. You also have easy access to the Madison Valley, which is awesome, particularly in the fall, to Norris Geyser Basin, Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. So overall, it's a good entrance to use. That entrance, by the way, is in the state of Montana. Another entrance that is in Montana is the north entrance. This is where Gardner is. And Gardner would be a good entrance to use if you're visiting the park's headquarters, which are at Mammoth Hot Springs. If you're coming into the town of Bozeman. That would be a good entrance to use. If you want to see the wildlife in the Lamar Valley, particularly the wolves, that's also a good reason to stay there. In addition, this entrance has access to some really incredible scenery as well. If you are coming from the northeast or even from the north or the eastern part of the US, you can consider using the northeast entrance. One thing that is really cool about the northeast entrance, and please don't underestimate this, guys, is the Beartooth Highway. Now, if you're looking on the map, you'll see it says there that the Beartooth Highway is closed from mid-October to late May. It generally opens somewhere around the 28th, 29th of May, and the reason for that is there is so much snow on the road that it takes a while to get it plowed, and also there's the possibility of adverse weather. Now, while I'm talking about that, one of the things that you should consider when planning your trip out to Yellowstone is checking which roads are going to be open. The easiest way to do this is go to Google, put in Yellowstone roads, and the first generic result, in other words, not the first result that isn't an ad, will be the Park Service page, which describes Yellowstone's roads. And if you scroll down a little, you'll see a live map that'll show you which roads are open. So I'm doing this now before the start of the spring-summer season, so there's not much open. But this map is generally updated and pretty close to real time. So you can see which roads are closed, and do check this out beforehand because it can impact your trip. Underneath it, they also have a text version, and you'll notice that you can get texts, which we do. We have a tour company, which you can see at YellowstoneTours.net. That's YellowstoneTours.net. And we sign up for this text service, and I suggest that you do as well, where the Park Service will send you texts when they open and close the roads. Why do I mention that now? Well, if we go back to the map at ysmotel.com/map, if you enter at the northeast entrance, you could be coming over the Beartooth Highway, which I mentioned before. The Beartooth Highway is high up, and you don't want to have a situation where you can't access the park because the Beartooth Highway has been closed. Now, even though the Beartooth Highway is outside Yellowstone, you'll find that it is still listed under the opening dates as well as the closing dates. You'll notice when we look at the full closing dates that the Beartooth Highway is scheduled to close on October the 12th, almost a full month before the other roads, most of the other roads in Yellowstone close. So we'll look at the northeast entrance again. There are not that many places to stay at the northeast entrance, but I will talk more about that later. And the reason that I do recommend the northeast entrance if you're coming from the northern United States or the eastern United States is that the Beartooth Highway is one of the most stunning roads anywhere, not only in the US, but literally anywhere in the world. The scenery is just beautiful beyond belief. If you're lucky, you may see mountain goats and other wildlife on the road, and there are some stunning lakes, not to mention the Absaroka mountain range. That then is the northeast entrance. Let us drop down to the east entrance. The east entrance is the one that you would use if you were staying in Cody, Wyoming. Cody is about 53 miles away. You can see if you're looking at the map that I've got up now on Google Maps. It's quite a drive to get to Yellowstone's entrance, 53 miles, as I said. And you also don't want to take that drive and get to the east entrance and find that it's closed. You'll notice there's a pass called Sylvan Pass on the way. It's a very steep pass and it climbs up pretty high. And the Park Service in recent years has become very proactive about closing roads before the storm arrives, much like airlines cancel flights before before a storm hits certain parts of the United States. So do check that out. You don't want to drive all the way from Cody and find that the Sylvan Pass is closed. So you'd use that entrance if you fly into Cody or if you've driven to Cody and you are staying in Cody. And that entrance is in the state of Wyoming. The fifth entrance that I'm going to consider is the south entrance of Yellowstone. Now, in order to get to Yellowstone's south entrance, you have to drive through Grand Teton National Park as well as something called the Rockefeller Parkway. I'm back on Google Maps. I'm showing you where Jackson, Wyoming is. So you would head north, you would get into Grand Teton, you would drive over something called the Rockefeller Parkway, and then you'd enter Yellowstone from the south entrance. Why would you use that entrance? Well, Jackson is a popular airport to fly into, but I will be dealing with that in more detail a little later in this podcast. You might just be staying in Jackson. You might be visiting Grand Teton. Just remember, it is a long drive to get to the south entrance, and then from there, it's also a bit of a drive, a wonderful drive, a beautiful drive, to get to what's called the Grand Loop Road. You may recall I mentioned that the roads through Yellowstone make up a massive figure of 8, and you will have a bit of a drive to get to the Grand Loop Road. So that, in a nutshell, describes the various entrances. What I'd like to talk about now is which airport you should fly into. And I've brought up another map on Google Maps. I'm going to start way down south in Salt Lake City. As we all know, Salt Lake City is in the state of Utah, and it is about 325 miles away from Yellowstone National Park. Once again, as I told you before, you would come up through the west entrance, but the reason to fly into Salt Lake City is it's the closest major airport. It's the closest international airport. So it's the airport where you're going to get the best flight prices coming into Salt Lake City. It's also a Delta hub, so you've got a lot of really useful connections from all around the world and, of course, all around the United States. Car rental prices are also going to be cheaper there. And then it is about a 4 3/4 hour drive if you know the route to get up to West Yellowstone. It may take you a little bit longer if you don't know the route, if you're doing it for the first time. There's also some pretty scenery along the way, particularly from Ashton onwards. So that is the most popular airport and the one that most people fly into when they are visiting Yellowstone. We also have an airport right here where I'm located in West Yellowstone. It's a small airport, and at the time I'm doing this podcast, we have about generally 1 flight a day, sometimes 2 flights a day coming in. All the flights come in from Salt Lake City, so you're going to have to make a connection in Salt Lake. So it's going to be more expensive, and the only flights that we get are on Delta as well. Now, in a regular year, and when I say a regular year, I mean a non-COVID year, we get 2 flights a day. The season for flying into West Yellowstone used to start on the 1st of June and run to the end of September. Delta did extend it, so it's now the end of the first week of May until about the first week of October. So West Yellowstone is a more expensive airport to fly into. You also will have that extra flight as you have to make the connection in Salt Lake. But once again, it has the advantage of being so conveniently located. I'm zooming in on the map, and I'm showing you where our little airport is. And once you're at the airport, it is literally about a 2.5 mile, maybe a 4 kilometer drive to get to the town of West Yellowstone. And guys, please remember, if you're looking for lodging, that's where our motel is located. We have a really cool motel with really good prices, and that's relatively speaking because everything's expensive in West Yellowstone. And you can see our motel at ysmotel.com. That's ysmotel.com. So those are the reasons that you may consider flying into West Yellowstone. Let's now go up to the north and into southwest Montana and the small town of Bozeman. Well, when I say small, it's the largest city now in southwest Montana. Bozeman Yellowstone International Airport is also a popular choice to fly into. More and more major airlines have started flying into Bozeman in recent years, so even though it's more expensive than Salt Lake, generally speaking, you can often get a good deal flying into Bozeman. Bozeman will also have car rentals. The prices will be lower than they are in West Yellowstone, but they'll still be reasonably high. But just look at where you have to drive to get into Yellowstone National Park. From Bozeman Airport to the town of West Yellowstone is about a 1 3/4 hour drive if there's no traffic or road issues. You can also go the other way to the east, and then when you reach the town of Livingston, drop down to the south, and that'll bring you to Gardner, which you'll recall is the north entrance. So there is a lot to be said for flying into the Bozeman airport. There's also a lot of hotels there, and you'll find that the hotel prices in Bozeman are going to be a lot lower than they are, say, in West Yellowstone or in Jackson or in Gardner. The third airport that I'd like to consider is Cody, Wyoming. This is not that popular an airport to fly into, but you never know, you may be able to get a decent price. The town of Cody also has a lot going for it. It's got the Buffalo Bill Historic Center, which is 5 museums in one, and it's really stunning. If you're coming to Yellowstone and you are considering Cody as an access point, make a note of that. In addition, they have like a family rodeo almost every night in season, but they also have one of the major rodeos on the professional rodeo circuit. The hotels will be sold out at that time, but if you are able to come during that time, make sure that you do try and get to the professional rodeo. But once again, it's a 53 mile drive from Cody into the south entrance. Then once you're at the south entrance, you've got a pretty long drive to get to the Grand Loop Road. But guys, let me tell you what, that drive is just stunning. It's really absolutely stunning. The scenery is just so beautiful. I wish I'd thought to pull up a few pictures before I started this podcast so I could show you what the scenery is like, but it's really, really, really beautiful. I would now like to consider the fifth airport, Jackson Hole. Much as is the case with Bozeman, the Jackson Hole Airport has been getting more and more popular in recent years, even though the Bozeman Airport is busier and has more flights. The flight prices into Jackson are generally going to be higher, but if your primary purpose is to see Grand Teton National Park, which you can see is just to the south of Yellowstone, it's a good airport to fly into. Jackson is also a great town. The hotels there are ridiculously expensive, even more expensive than West Yellowstone, but it can be a good airport to fly into. There are obviously car rentals there, and there's so much to do in the Jackson area. And by the way, in various other of our podcasts, I explain the difference between Jackson Hole and Jackson itself. So Jackson is an option. Just remember, expensive hotel prices, quite a long drive to get to Yellowstone. Really, really, really cool cowboy western town. From that perspective alone, it's really worth a visit. There's also some wonderful whitewater rafting on the Snake River. So Jackson does have a lot going for it. What I would now like to talk about is where to stay inside or when you come to Yellowstone. And what I'm going to start with is actually staying inside Yellowstone National Park. There's no question that if you can get lodging inside Yellowstone National Park, go for it. You can stay in a formal lodging establishment like a hotel or a cabin or a motel, or you can camp. I'm not going to go into the camping on this podcast, but I'm just going to be talking about the hotels, the inns, cabins, and so on. What I'd like to start with first is the Old Faithful area, and I'm now back at our motel map, which you can see at ysmotel.com/map. This is a National Park Service map, and if you go all the way to the top, as I have done, and then zoom in, you'll find that the Park Service has been kind enough to put in close-up maps of the more popular areas in Yellowstone, and I'm now looking at the close-up area for Old Faithful. Old Faithful Inn, and you can see there's a line that comes across to show you where the inn is. It's not all the way over there on the left. Old Faithful Inn, for my money, is the most beautiful building in the entire national park system. I do have a separate podcast on just lodging in and around Yellowstone, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the various lodges. Just be aware what the options are. So here you can stay at Old Faithful Inn, you can stay at Old Faithful Lodge, which are cabins, and you can also stay at Snow Lodge. Old Faithful Lodge is closer to Old Faithful Geyser than Snow Lodge is. So those are the first three in-park lodging options that I'm going to tell you about. And once again, if you do have the opportunity to stay inside the park, guys, please do so. Let's now consider Mammoth Hot Springs, which you'll recall I told you is the park headquarters. Once again, the Park Service has been kind enough to put a close-up map in of Mammoth Hot Springs. And at Mammoth Hot Springs, you've got the Mammoth Hot Springs Hotel, which also has cabins. That is also a great place to stay, very close to the north entrance, and there's a lot happening there with the terraces, as well as historic Fort Yellowstone, and there's various other places you can access from there. Look at our dedicated Yellowstone podcast on Yellowstone lodging, and you'll get some more information. I'm now going to look at Canyon Village. At Canyon Village, you have Canyon Lodge and Cabins. Now, Canyon Lodge and Cabins are the biggest lodging unit, if you like, in all of Yellowstone. There's more than 500 rooms and cabins, and it goes without saying that you have got great access to Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone if you are staying there. Let's drop down a little bit now, and we're going to take a look at the lake area. And here we have various other lodging places. Now, I mentioned to you that Old Faithful Inn, for my money, is the most wonderful building in the entire national park system. Well, the Lake Yellowstone Hotel, or just Lake Hotel, is also a really wonderful building. You walk outside, you see this great historic facade, and you have wonderful views over Yellowstone Lake. You have both the hotel and the cottages at Lake Yellowstone, but you also have the Lake Lodge cabins as well. So there's quite a bit of lodging there as well. Let's now go all the way to the bottom, and we're going to come to Grant Village. Grant Village, as you can see, is also on Yellowstone Lake, and it is on the section of road between West Thumb and the south entrance. There's also a close-up of that. We can see West Thumb, Grant Village, and at Grant Village, you've got 6 two-story buildings, each containing 50 rooms. They don't have a huge amount of character, but it can be a fun place to stay as well. The last lodging I want to look at inside the park if you're looking at the map, is at the so-called Tower Roosevelt area, where the road from the northeast entrance meets up with the Grand Loop Road. And there you have what they call Roosevelt Lodge and cabins. You can't stay in the lodge, but you can obviously stay in the cabins. Guys, I'd like to show you just one other bit of lodging, and I don't know if they show it on this map, the one that I'm on at the moment, so I'm going to go to another map and see if I can find it. But you'll notice that just to the south of Yellowstone, you have the Rockefeller Parkway. There's this very rustic road that comes in. I don't really recommend it unless you have a lot of time and you're in a vehicle that can take a road that is not really that developed. But this is where Flag Ranch is. So Flag Ranch is on the Rockefeller Parkway between Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. Not many people know about it, but it also is a great place to stay if you're in the Yellowstone area. What I would also like to do now is talk about lodging outside Yellowstone. Remember that we do have a dedicated podcast on Yellowstone lodging, so I'm not going to deal with it in an awful lot of detail here, but just be aware the West Entrance has a lot of lodging. My favorite, of course, is our own motel, ysmotel.com. That's ysmotel.com, where we operate a motel in the town of West Yellowstone. There is, however, also a lot of other lodging, most of it very good as well. So please consider West Yellowstone as a place to stay when you're in the area. We'll go up north. Gardner also has a decent number of motels, not as many as West Yellowstone. It's not as big. The prices in West Yellowstone are high, but then everything is expensive in our area. The prices in Gardner are also going to be high. There's also not as much lodging, I think I mentioned, as there is in West Yellowstone, which has the greatest inventory of the towns closest to the park. Let's now take a look at the northeast entrance. Please remember that the northeast entrance cannot be accessed other than taking the road that runs through the park for a lot of the year. So do check to make sure that you can access Silvergate and Cook City, which are the two towns, from the east. Make sure that the access roads are open. There is lodging in Cook City. There's even less in Silvergate, but there's not a lot in either town, and it does tend to sell out quickly. Having said that, it is a great place to stay. The scenery is so pretty. With both the northeast entrance and the east entrance, the closer you get coming from Yellowstone traveling to the east, or in this case to the northeast, the more beautiful the scenery gets. You start getting into some of the higher peaks of the Absaroka. It's spelled Absaroka, but the Absaroka Mountains. So you have these towering mountains, you have little streams all over the place. You have the expansive valleys of the Lamar Valley, and the scenery, as I say, is just stunning. So it is a wonderful place to stay. Let's drop down a little bit towards the east entrance. Now, you may recall I mentioned to you that the east entrance is going to lead you to Cody, Wyoming. But in addition to Cody, you're also going to find lodging along the road from where you leave Yellowstone at the east entrance towards Cody. And this is some of the most cool lodging to stay at in the entire region. And I'm zooming in a bit just to see what we can see, if anything, on Google Maps. Not an awful lot. You'll just have to take my word for it that there are some great rustic cabins and rustic motels and cowboy sort of places and almost dude ranch sort of places to stay on the road from the east entrance towards Cody. So please do have a look at those. Then, of course, in Cody itself, you will have a large number of motels. You can see that it's a decent sized town. Prices are not going to be as high as Gardner and West Yellowstone and Jackson. And you do have a decent sized inventory. Just remember, you are further away. However, this town has got so much going for it. It is a real Western town. Jackson is a bit of a cultivated Western town. I mentioned to you the Buffalo Bill, it's disappeared off the map. There it is, Buffalo Bill Center of the West, which has 5 museums. I also mentioned the rodeo. The rodeo grounds are just to the west of town, where you have this sort of family rodeo where the local cowboys take part 5 or 6 nights a week. But then you also have that one rodeo on the professional circuit. If we get back towards Yellowstone itself, let's now consider staying in the town of Jackson, Wyoming. Jackson, I previously told you, is a really cool town. There's so much going on there. There's some great bars that have some pretty cool bands playing country music, as you might expect, not only in Jackson, but just to the west of it, just before you climb up Teton Pass, you've got Wilson. So the lodging in Jackson is going to be more expensive. In fact, that's probably putting it politely. The lodging in Jackson is way expensive. Before I forget, it's probably got the coolest DQ in the entire United States. They remodeled it recently. Check it out. So Jackson has got a lot of restaurants, a lot of coffee shops, bakeries. It also has 2 markets. The markets in West Yellowstone have got limited inventory and they're really expensive. All in all, Jackson is a really good place to stay. You've also got the airport just up the road, which I'm showing you on Google Maps now. But then if we zoom out, there are some other places that you can stay. Wilson is a small town, but there is a bit of lodging there. You climb up over Teton Pass and drop down into Idaho. This is where quite a few locals stay because it's so expensive for working class people to try and live in Jackson. The lodging just isn't affordable. So there is lodging in Victor, there's lodging in Driggs, and there's lodging in a few other places. Then if we make our way to the south, heading out from Jackson, you'll find that in the Hobart area and then down in Alpine, there's also places to stay. So if you find that Jackson is sold out and you particularly want to access the south entrance to Yellowstone or Grand Teton National Park, consider going a little bit further to the south. You've got a bit more of a drive, but you'll find that the scenery is really spectacular. Just take a look. This section of the road has got the Snake River right next to it. I'm going to zoom in to see if I can find it. I doubt that I'll be able to, but somewhere along over here, there's a section of road. There is a pullout where you can sit on top of one of the rapids and watch the whitewater rafting guys shooting the rapids, which is a lot of fun. I hope you found this Yellowstone podcast, Know Before You Go, informative. Once again, this will be one of a series. If you're looking for a tour of the Yellowstone area, remember that our company operates more tours literally than anyone in the world. You can see them at yellowstonetours.net. That's yellowstonetours.net. Looking for a place to stay in the Yellowstone area, check out our motel, ysmotel.com. That's ysmotel.com. We also operate hikes, shorter hikes from 2 hours to a day in the Yellowstone, inside Yellowstone National Park. And you can see those at yellowstonedayhikes.com. That's yellowstonedayhikes.com. If you did want to find our various virtual Yellowstone tours and Yellowstone podcasts, just go to YouTube, put in Yellowstone Tours without a space. So that's Yellowstone Tours, one word, hit enter. And even though one of our videos comes up first, YouTube does ask, did you mean Yellowstone Space Tours? You instead want to search for Yellowstone Tours. That'll then bring up our channel. Click on Yellowstone Tours, and you can see we have literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos and podcasts about Yellowstone and the surrounding region. Thanks for joining me. I hope to catch you next time.